Hi, I'm Danielle Karen, and in this podcast, I'm going to share with you knowledge and tools that I believe should be accessible to everyone. They're fundamental and essential to being human. Embody Your Power is an integrative model that bridges science, spirituality, and ancient wisdom to give you the resources needed to live your fullest potential. As a psychotherapist for over 16 years and now as a coach, I help people know, reclaim, and embody their power on all levels. It's my mission to help you connect to your unshakable resilience, to know true power and freedom, to be sovereign and to remember your divine nature. If you're wanting to learn tools to release layers of conditioning, heal from trauma, feel at home in your body, have inner peace, expand your capacity for joy, connect spiritually, and take a journey with me to embody your power, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for joining me. Together, let's raise our consciousness to help evolve humanity. Welcome to the Embody Your Power podcast. I hope you enjoy this interview with Loch Kelly, as it's insightful and a very unique perspective on IFS, consciousness, and spirituality. Loch Kelly is the creator of the new Mindful Glimpses app. He's an award-winning author of 2 books. He's a licensed psychotherapist, and he's a leader in the field of meditation and embodied awakening. He's the founder of the nonprofit Effortless Mindfulness Institute and has co-taught workshops with the founder of IFS, Dick Schwartz, on accessing self. He's collaborated with neuroscientists at Yale, UPenn, and NYU in a study on how awareness training can enhance compassion and well-being. Loch is known for his warm sense of humor and his ability to directly introduce people to their awake nature as a source of healing. He offers online advanced classes on IFS and effortless mindfulness training. You can find him at lochkelly.org. That's LOCHKELLY.org. Welcome to the Embody Your Power podcast, Loch. I'm super excited to dive into a stimulating conversation with you.
Thank you so much. So great to be with you here.
Yeah, so we met in 2017 at a retreat in Italy that you were co-leading with Dick Schwartz on IFS and spirituality, which was tremendously transformative for me. And one of the exercises that you had us do was very profound in my journey. It was awareness, being aware of itself, which we're going to dive into more in our conversation here. But I wanted to first start with my podcast is called Embody Your Power, because I'd like to support people in embodying their power in all ways, especially type of power that no one can take from us, which I believe one of the aspects of that is really knowing the truth about who we are.
Yes.
Loch, I think your work really helps people know and experience that. And I wonder if you can share how your work does that.
Yeah. So bring both those themes together, which is the power that no one can take away and your experience of this awareness of awareness. So, I was fortunate enough to study both psychology and get a fellowship to go to India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, where I spent some time with kind of in-depth, advanced, yet simple meditation. And the real turning point in this particular what's called direct practice meditation that I'm calling effortless mindfulness now, is recognizing that who we are is not our thoughts or our age or our personality or our particularities, even our thoughts or our history or our memory, but essentially is this which people have called being or spirit or essence, or what they call awake awareness, which is a kind of intelligence or nature of mind that's prior to thought, that arises as our thought, as kind of symbols that we use to label things, but the key is that belief we have, I think, therefore I am, is not who we are. That thinking in Buddhism is considered the sixth sense that appears to this awake consciousness. And so discovering that which can't be hurt, which can't have its power taken away, which is free of worry or anxiety, free of shame, and yet has this loving, unconditional presence that is with the parts of us that have shame, worry, or fear. So this is the power and the liberation and also the fullness that doesn't just use meditation to escape, but similar to IFS therapy, steps out of our parts-based view, our small separate self, and asks for some space, and then finds this compassionate self that we are that can be with ourselves and which can speak and relate and create in the world with others.
Thank you for that description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so is awake awareness synonymous with consciousness?
Yeah, I distinguish it in a way in that awake awareness is pure awareness prior to any mixing with a type of consciousness. So there is this experience, which it sounds like you had, which is quite unusual because when we experience awareness of awareness, it feels just like a gap or freedom or like, and we don't take it to be what we're aware of and where we're aware from. It opens us to connection, and then we focus on the feeling of love or joy or freedom or connection, and we don't realize the source is this awareness. So this awareness has no contents. And as soon as it mingles with any pattern, so you could say there's awake awareness and seeing is eye consciousness, then there's hearing consciousness, there's thinking consciousness, there's parts-based consciousness, there's ego manager consciousness, which has self essence, which is synonymous with awake awareness. And then self energy would be consciousness, would be self that is conscious because it has now energy, it's awareness plus aliveness. So there's a consciousness that then has qualities to it, if that makes sense. But
Yes.
often
I love the brilliance that you bring, Locke, because you're able to define and delineate these very subtle shifts in awareness and consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really helpful. I don't know a lot of other people doing that. So I really appreciate you defining and helping us really start to get the subtleties of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's all experiential. It's not meant to be philosophical or intellectual or mental. It actually is just using thinking consciousness as a way to discriminate from experience and give it some common pointer. So it's really like pointing at the moon. It's not the finger, it's not the word, it's the moon that, and when we point within, it's not the philosophical idea that there's pure awareness, it's the feeling and the way to let go or surrender or open or drop into that which is already here. And that's really the most amazing thing, is this awake awareness, which is considered in these contemplative traditions to be the most valued human dimension, is equally available within each of us. And that's the similar premise to Dick Schwartz and IFS, that this self, you can call it self with a capital S, or Buddhism, they use They use it mind, nature of mind. So mind, which is more the knowing quality, or self, which is the identity quality, or awareness, which is the little bit, transpersonal, then come and connect to the personal, and they are the foundation that is felt. And when that shift happens, it literally is like a developmental shift in consciousness. It moves toward what IFS called self-leadership. So it's not just a meditation state or an esoteric experience or peak state. It's literally becomes the new normal.
How wonderful is that?
Yeah.
So, Loch, how did you get here? Can you share any experiences or awakenings that really had an impact in your life?
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of them, and you kind of don't, or I didn't realize them until I looked back and had a few others later. And then I was like, oh, maybe that's what that was. I thought that was just this weird thing that happened, and then you go back to child and go, all right. Oh, yeah. Right now I have a category, when I had some childhood, openings and connections. And that led me to feel that something's going on that's quite extraordinary. So I could share one kind of, well, share two. One is kind of a fun one, which is that when I was playing sports, I could enter this flow state, which was kind of dropping out of the thinking mind into an embodied, connected way of being, which now is what I consider kind of an essential quality of awake, loving flow, which is self-leadership. So it's similar because it's optimally functioning, but not referencing thoughts and being a thinker, but it's really embodied and open-eyed, and yet so connected and blissful and functioning in a way that you're, really optimal. So I listened to this guy on TV who was talking about football, and he said, "Oh, this quarterback has eyes in the back of his head." And I thought, oh, wait a minute. It's not like he can see it. It's that you open, oh, that's what I do. I open my awareness around, and then it drops me into my body. And then it's as if there's a panoramic feeling, but it's not really visual. It's a field of awareness that is open and connected. And then I thought, oh, let me see if I can do that intentionally. So I started to create this way of looking up, opening my awareness up, dropping around. And I would do it when I played sports. And then I remember one time one of my fellow classmates came up, "Man, that was great. How did you do it?" And I said, "You really want to know?" Well, I open my awareness up, I drop it down, and he was like, "Huh? Oh, cool, man." And and then another guy who was a couple of years older had overheard me, and he came the next practice and threw this book at me. He said, "Here, kid, read this." And it was Zen and the Art of Archery. And so that was the first time I read this book, and I was going like, oh, there's people who talk about this and value it, and it's not just weird. And that led me to start to kind of explore the different kinds of meditation and my own experience, really, because that's where it started.
How validating it sounds like to read that book at that time in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the awareness piece, that I was having this memory, I think I was in my early 20s, and I studied with this guy named Tom Brown Jr. Have you ever heard of this guy? He's like this master tracker. He goes into the woods and tracks animals and people. But he was saying you have to have this vision, and he had a name for it, but where you really open your perception and you're not focused on one thing. You really open it up. And by doing that and walking in the woods kind of slowly, you're way more aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, that's kind of, I call it panoramic awareness and unity consciousness. So it really is a unity mind. I feel like it's also what's described as connecting left brain and right brain. Because left brain can discriminate and particularize, and right brain kind of feels like it connects in a wider way. So when you have both going on, it feels balanced. It almost feels like there's a seamless field, and you feel supported. So it's not just going out to see things. It's as if there's a receiving of some support from something greater than yourself.
Beautiful. I want to get back into that. And before I do want to have you just outline kind of the basic way that you would describe self, parts, and consciousness. And perhaps you have a different way to describe it and define it than Dick Schwartz. How would you define these terms?
Yeah. And maybe I'll share one more experience that kind of relates. So then that it kind of brings in kind of this emotional quality. So there's kind of this transcendent quality that has this, embodied. But then when I was a sophomore in college, I had a series of losses. So my best friend from college died in a car accident. Then my father developed brain cancer and passed away within 6 months. Then my grandmother, who was 99 years old, passed away. And I was, going through this kind of grief. And I was, sophomore in college. So my friends just hadn't been through that. So I tried to talk to them, and they like, "Oh, sorry, man, let's go have a beer." I guess about the best I could do. So I'm walking out of the library on a kind of a beautiful winter night, and I just feel this grief. I've been trying to deal with it and couldn't quite. And all of a sudden I heard this voice that said, "I don't know if you can take this much longer." And now I kind of understand it to be a part of me that said that. Mm-hmm. But I kind of looked back. I was like, well, because it wasn't someone else. It was like, but it seemed to be coming from like right here. So I was like, I kind of looked up, and as I looked up, my awareness kind of went right through it into the night sky. And so I just went, "Oh," and then I just felt kind of similar to that panoramic awareness, except now it was opened me up to connect to this, crystal clear night sky that was so beautiful, such beauty and love and tenderness. And it just kind of started to melt and be with this part that felt defeated, and with my whole body, and all this grief just went, "Oh," and I started crying and laughing and feeling like, "Oh my God, what is this? Is this?" And I didn't think of it as religious or even spiritual. I just thought, "Oh, this is something, whatever this is what I want to study." Like this is what I want to know. Whatever this is, that's what I'll do with my life. And so what it feels like is that's kind of, there's a part, and ask you for some space, and then you discover what feels like self-essence, which is this pure awareness that then has this self-energy, which connects to the part and has this compassionate capacity to be with even those, traumatized parts that no small, smart ego manager can really deal with, because they're actually stronger and more emotionally powerful than I could bear. And so now there was this greater sense of self that was beyond myself, that could be called self or no self, whichever you like. That is, whatever that is, it has no name, but it's real, palpable. And that was my how to access that and how to apply it immediately to emotions, body, psychology, and healing.
Right, which is such a gift that you bring, Locke, and it's such a powerful, profound story that you shared. Thank you. And the aspect that you're describing of self, why I think it's such a gift and so important is I don't think a lot of people do actually access that. Right. Maybe, I don't know if we want to call it depth of self. But I think it's important that we do know that it exists and that there are ways to access it.
Yes.
Right. Because
Yeah.
some people, as they're doing this work might start with, and I certainly started it in my own journey with IFS, was compassion, curiosity, right? These C words. But what you're describing is, an incredible aspect of self.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, even using the model itself, if you start to use it really well, you can kind of also discover its, where it can be expanded, which I feel like, Dick and I have talked about many times, that if you start, many people who are, listening may have done some IFS where you feel a part within or around your body and you locate it. So the question or the protocol is, are you aware of this part within or around you? So let's say you have anxiety and it's in your head or your throat. Is there a boundary? There's a location now. Can you be aware that it's a part of you? And now can you thank this part for trying to help you, trying to keep you alive or get ready or do something? And then can you ask it for some space? So asking it for space is pretty much what I call a mindful move. So you disidentify. So it's very similar to what people do in mindfulness meditation. You step out of the center of who you are, and you now are observing it, whether you're observing it from somewhere, another location, but it seems to still be a point of view. So even when people do that, they say, are you aware of this other part? Yes. And now can you be aware of this part more clearly? Yeah. And how do you feel toward it? And some people say, I feel sorry toward it. I feel compassionate. I feel curious. But what if that were another part? Because it started with this ordinary self. Are you aware of the part? Can you ask it for some space? Are you now aware of the part? So if it's a polarized part or a self-like part, which I think, having been curiously asking, using curiosity to ask my colleagues and others, then I ask, so if that's a part, then who or what is aware of these two parts, the anxious part and the curious, compassionate part? And then what they often do is they open up into this more spacious and pervasive, non-part based. So a part has a location, a point of view. And this, you ask, well, is there a location or a boundary? Is there a color or shape? No. Is it in just one place? No, it's everywhere. And then, but are you aware of it? Yes. Are you aware as it? Yes. Are you aware from it? Yes. And how does this feel toward the mindful witness or the curious, small c, compassionate part, and the part that was anxious? And it says, well, I think, I feel that we're all one. There's a feeling of knowing it, not by being a detached witness, which the first one detaches, gets space, and is separate, but not re-identifying. But this third thing, which is not, so it doesn't blend back, but now it's interconnected to it and spacious. So spacious and pervasive, and recognizing almost like an ocean and a wave, recognizing the agitated part and the little detached bird flying above the ocean of the agitation. So it's aware from the sky and the ocean in a feeling of, this is who I am. I'm the presence.
Presence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you would describe self then? That presence? And
yeah.
Does that have feelings, love? Does it have emotions, or is it more of an equanimity there?
Yeah. So this again, I'm going to do the discrimination that you like. So I needed to add a category because Dick, interestingly, having been with him for a bunch of years, he originally said, "Oh, self has no agenda." And then now he says, oh, so no, self does have an agenda to be compassionate and to heal. But what he was doing, I think, is recognizing this first aspect of self, or this primary aspect of self, which is, I call self-essence, as opposed to self-energy. And self-essence is this awake awareness, or in Tibet, they call it Rigpa, true nature, or in Hinduism, they call it Turiya. And it has no qualities. In its essence, for that primary dimension, but but you can't actually, it's so pure, it can be aware of itself, but it can't be aware of contents. So it only can be aware of just the fullness of it, but not details. And it needs awareness to become consciousness, or self-essence to become self-energy. And yet it's got to remain, it can't come back to be a thought-based part. So now when it comes back, now it's self-energy. Now it has essential qualities. So the first move that most people make when they feel compassionate from this first, can you ask that part if it can give you some space? How do you feel compassionate? I call that small c compassion, or they call it in Buddhism relative compassion. And this essential quality is ultimate compassion, or unconditional love. It has no conditions. So it is not expecting anything to change initially, and it heals by fully naturally accepting. So it's a unity consciousness that is more from your boundless heart than your head.
Right. So that's self-essence. And would you say so I have some questions about that. Is it a sense of kind of like abiding? Just you could say abiding, or you could say almost like stillness or silence, if you use the ear as a metaphor, as a door, and it just isness. Yeah. And then when I'm there, it feels like a fuzzy boundary between myself and what you're saying, unity consciousness.
So fuzzy boundary
meaning like, I'm not sure if it's like, it feels like it can really move right into unity consciousness. Is there an identity, or is it a unity when I'm at that point?
Yeah, because it's almost in its pureness. The fuzziness is like the first vibration sensation that isn't formed yet. So like in its pure form, it's like big sky mind. It's like, there's actually form is emptiness. Then emptiness is form, is what they say in Zen. So form is emptiness, void, just no thing. You're not a thing. So it's just isness or abiding. And then, but you can't walk around that way because we're in this precious human body. So the mingling of the two is so important, and not just going to pure awareness and coming back to a calmer ego manager, and then going to pure awareness and coming back to a calmer ego manager, but coming to self-leadership. In other words, that awareness is now the nature of mind, essence of self, and mingles with pleasant and unpleasant feelings and parts that are exiled and protective. And it can be aware of them without having to form around one, or be taken over by one, or blend with one in order to speak and walk and talk, because the human body can now be its vehicle to walk and talk, and then parts can be part of the team that start to help function, as, thank you very much. So you don't have to be in like I am the self. There is nobody here. You know, that's not the thing. And it's not like, I feel much more calm, but now I'm back in a, back in a part that is trying to be compassionate, and another part that says, why are you being so compassionate?
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you're really helping us understand how do we embody this essence.
I sometimes talk about that self essence, self energy, self embodiment, and then self leadership. So there is almost like a stage of embodiment that is this unity consciousness. So when awareness, aliveness in your body and all the parts are there, and they can be throwing tantrums, like, what are we doing? And you're just there, like I call, grandmother awareness, just like, all right, sweethearts, just, it's all okay. No one's getting hurt here. I know you really got a lot of things that hurt, but I'm here and we'll not going anywhere. And there's just a kind of a body that is this body, but then, like one of these teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, called it interbeing. So it's embodiment that's interconnected to other beings and nature. So there's feeling of a embodiment, and then self-leadership is kind of the action. I call it awake, loving flow consciousness, that you can talk and walk and create, and then a part comes up and triggers you, get triggered, and it takes over, and you're like, whoa, and you're like on this ride. But you learn these tools. So the tools that I'm interested in and teach mostly aren't as much about how therapists can work with clients or how to work in a therapeutic way with exiles, but how in the middle of your day to feel yourself getting taken over by a part and recognize, have that first awakening. Oh, I'm in a part. Oh, there's a part. Oh, that's a part. That's the first awakening. And then it's like, all right, can you be with it and be aware of it, and without judging or without trying to fix it or make it go away, or bring the polarized part in that wants to help it. Okay. And now can you ask for some space? And all of a sudden you start to do this. And then it just becomes kind of part of your life to do this navigating of your own consciousness using these tools of IFS and these tools of effortless mindfulness.
Beautiful. Would you say that consciousness could be another C word for self?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because especially for self energy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the self essence, would you say, is eternal?
I mean, that's the thing. I think you might have to be eternal or have been there before time started to really make that claim. But I don't always go to the metaphysical, but it feels like you could use that. When you're in the now, it feels timeless. You're not orienting to time. That's one of the amazing, like, time. So awareness is kind of the space quality, that the now is the not orienting to the past to be, and not anticipating one moment into the future, and noticing the present moments coming and going. So you're actually not being in the present moment. You actually can't live in the present moment, because present moments, if you really define things as they're defined, present moments just come and go, tick tock, like a river flowing down. Each moment is gone. But the now is aware of past, present, and future. In the now, you can make a list to go shopping later and feel like you're not caught in the present, the past, or the future.
Mm-hmm. So coming back to the parts,
Yeah.
so we know parts have self, and how is their self expressed or experienced differently than self?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's important to say something about parts. I mean, this is one of the radical big breakthroughs, is moving from psychological system and even just common cultural understanding of like there's one me. I have a personality. There's a me that has a personality, and I am worried. I am angry. I am sad. So as if these are qualities of a me. And then some of the more radical spiritualities and meditation systems, like there is no me. There's just no self. And then as if that me is a illusion. But the IFS and this effortless mindfulness, it's like, no, that's an important part of you. You don't need to get rid of that. In fact, it will serve a very good function to get you around. It's just not the center of who you are. It's not the essence of who you are. It's not the ego identity. It's an ego function. It's a function of me. So as soon as you realize that, oh, there isn't a me that has feelings, but there are parts that there's, I am sad. I feel sadness. I am aware of a part of me that's sad. I am aware that the awareness doesn't feel sad and is connected to the part of me that does feel sad, and other parts that are here that don't feel sad, but I can be with the part of me that's sad. And the way we know each other from essential nature is from around and within. We start to realize, oh, we're not different. So, the great metaphor that's easy to understand is ocean and waves. So a wave, when it arises, it's like, oh no, I'm going to crash on the shore. I'm going to crash in the middle of the ocean. Oh, I just returned to the, so the ocean, we're all the ocean of experience, and each part is like a wave in the ocean, arises, being the same and being different, being unique. Some is just like blah, 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 and others whoa, whoa. So that kind of is happening within us, and certainly people experience parts differently. Some of them feel like they really are little people. Some people see them. Some people feel them as energy packets or more personality, thought, feeling, sensation, and worldview. So that often is what a part is. It has a view or an opinion or agenda or a way that it sees, or you could say it's kind of caught in a time prison. It sees like it's a 4-year-old that got stuck in this traumatic hurt and started to just, fight, flight, or freeze. It kind of froze. It kind of is a wound trauma that freezes and hides.
Yeah, I love how you describe the various ways that parts could show up.
Yeah.
And so they have self, so they're part of the ocean.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that they get burdened with separation, conditioning, trauma, pain, and fear.
Yeah. So that's the nature of that's the blending, unblending. The essence of what a part is it feels disconnected. It kind of self-references and turns in and collapses around itself as if it's separate. So that's it. And then it doesn't know self.
Right. And that's part of its suffering, to be cut off from source.
Yeah. That's really the main suffering of a parts-based life. And even when it is a parts-based life, it doesn't even feel like a parts-based life. It feels like you get possessed by different parts and you're calling them all me. There's the part that's judging, and then the part says, don't judge so much. Well, what do you mean judge? Judging? You're judging me for judging. Don't judge me for judging. I'm judging you for judging. So that they all just keep saying I. And they're, sometimes you can feel their voices are, in your head, but it tends to feel always like me, and that recognition there's a part is one of the amazing realizations. Then the next realization that there are no bad parts is a radical one, which is similar to this realization method in Buddhism, which differs from kind of trying to transform negative into positive all the time, but just like recognition that it's all nature of mind. It's all made of awake consciousness. It just patterns into pleasant, unpleasant, ups and downs, and everything is trying to be connected in love. The essential nature, even when it is disconnected, is connected. When it feels disconnected, it's still connected always. So there's never, on the ultimate view, there's always an awake nature that's just dancing. On the relative view, it gets caught in a point of view, in a part. And so that dance of what awakens is not the awakeness. The awakeness is already awake. It's the part that's contracted awakens to its own nature, which is greater than itself and within itself. And that's where the healing capacity comes from, it being both a compassionate other. That's why self-energy has to move, can't just be there's a self that's outside feeling compassionate toward this poor little part and trying to help it unburden, as if there's another dualism created. It's really got to be in there patiently letting it feel the reality that's safe.
So would you say that the path of awakening, in one way we can say, is that the self is helping those contracted parts awaken?
Yeah, I mean, it is helping. It already is, that's this paradoxical thing. It's already is the self, and it already is awake, but it's ignorance or obscuration,
or its perspective, maybe.
Perspective, and the pure self essence or awake awareness has no agenda to awaken because it already sees everything as already connected, even with its suffering and pains, and like that's all part of it. Yep, it's not going to kill me. It's not killing anything. It's just and then as soon as the two come together and kind of, it's almost like the heart mind or the heart's desire, the connection of that initial awareness and aliveness has that love, has the agenda. It's even more than compassion. It's really the unconditional love or the heart's desire that says, oh, the relative is suffering. The relative can heal some of the ignorance and be more free rather than having to be dominated by that contraction, part to part, and part to world. So this, so even that initial awakening, so self-leadership, just initial, realization of this, unburdening some, and you can have a realization before all parts are unburdened. You don't have to unburden. That's the thing that one person who went to hear Dick early on before I met him said, hey, Loch, you should check this guy out because he does just what you do, except upside down. And so by that, he just meant he was very much at that point about, the way to access self, you have to unburden the parts, and then that will allow you to access self. Whereas I was like, the only way you're going to unburden those parts is you got to have the capacity of self, because these protectors are not going to let you in. And he's like, no, those protectors, you got to get permission to go in, but who's going in? I'm like, who's going in to unburden them? You can relatively unburden them, but then they're just kind of like, you're still within a parts world. So we, ultimately, either way you go,
You can find your way there.
You find your way. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
nothing's ever perfect. It's not about that. But there's these tipping points or these awakenings, these droppings, these openings, realizations that make such a difference in people's lives, that is possible, that it requires getting out of, I talk about these four obstacles to self-leadership. And one is often called this spiritual bypass, which would be to not do psychological work and just act like everything's divine, it's all taken care of, there's only awareness in the world, I am the awareness, and there's no problems. Then I call intellectual overpass, which is you make that
I love that term.
You have some little experience of that, but you can't kind of hold on to it because you're kind of pushing it in the first place. So then you have to make a philosophy of it. I believe that I am free of all, that all things are working out to be, and then you make that. But then the third one is psychological underpass. So that means you just do continual psychological work without ever accessing self or self-essence or awake consciousness. So you're just working.
Yeah, but that is so important to be speaking about in the mental health field.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people are speaking about that, I don't think.
No. I mean, the IFS is one of, there's a few models, obviously, Jung and psychosynthesis and a few others that have, kind of a meditative or self-essence or awake consciousness as some dimension, but in IFS, it's upfront said, this is who you are and this is what heals. And so that immediately was like, okay, let's go. So the psychological underpass you can do. So that's the amazing thing. So if you do whatever psychological system, generally therapy is good, so it will have benefits. And initial meditation generally is good and generally has benefits. There's also some percentage of people do therapy that, it doesn't help them. And some people who meditate have, doesn't help them, makes them more stressed or just is a waste of time. But those are all relative practices of, working with the battery of the body, just body, mind, and parts, moving parts around, trying to clean up the cloud of your body and mind. As soon as you clean it up a little bit, then it gets messy again over here. You got to go back, you got to move this around. And until you step out of the cloud and experience the awareness that's already free and here and aware of itself by itself, and then is also within the cloud and arising as humidity and thoughts and feelings in your body and the room, then it's like a developmental stage is what I consider it. So I don't think it's like for Olympic athletes, a meditation only, or for the fortunate few. That I think it's learnable, it's teachable, it's part of that kind of system, like doing IFS therapy, that you're doing it to move towards self-leadership. So if that's the goal, let's be clear about what that is and how to do it.
Right. That brings me back to, so the experience I had with you of awareness being aware of itself. I want to share that. And I don't, it might be a little bit different than what you were trying to have me experience. But so after our retreat, I went to Sardinia for a week in Italy, and I was floating in the ocean and really relaxed. And I started to become aware of the water. And I started becoming aware that I was connected to the water, which is connected to a huge ocean. And then I turned that awareness around, and I could start to feel that ocean aware of me. And then I did the same thing with the air, the space, the sky. started becoming aware of it and it being aware of me. And there was a quite ecstatic feeling of being also in the middle of the water and the air, being aware of both.
Yeah. That's it. That's both literally it and the best metaphor for it.
Okay.
That's amazing. I mean, those are the metaphors I use, and you're like, well, let me just literally do that. Let me literally be aware of having the ocean be aware of me and me arising in and as the ocean, and then the sky, because that's the one. The ocean is a little more visceral and kind of, okay, yeah, right. I'm in the ocean. I kind of feel it. I'm using your senses. But as soon as you do the sky, that's the one that's the one that's not on the map of our Western consciousness. That the awareness is aware, and it's not aware from the middle of my head using only one type of awareness called attention that works like a flashlight, that there's actually a feeling of awareness of the sky, and almost as if the awareness that I am is aware of the sky, from the sky, and from within me. So that there's this pervasive, boundless awareness. But how does that make sense? You go back to thought, like, that doesn't sound scientific. Like, how could that be true? That's weird. That's, some belief. But that's the description, that's the pointer, that's the marker, that's the felt sense experience. And it is like when you feel that, your brain actually, from having done neuroscience experiments, your brain will show that in a couple different places that it has changed its functioning into a calm, less going from default mode to task mode, this kind of going into daydream and out. It'll balance inside and outside, and it'll balance this parietal lobe, which is, when it's very active, is always making you feel separate from everything else. So when you do the awareness of awareness that's outside and inside, then your parietal lobe activity goes down, rather than when your parietal lobe activity goes down, you feel that. So you actually do the meditation, affects your body and starts to stabilize this new normal, as and that's the feeling of what the person you studied with talked about, walking in the woods. And that's one of the markers of being in a flow state, which is one of the optimal states for musicians and athletes and others who optimally perform. They feel connected to everything. They feel like they're beyond the ego. They feel like there's an essential bliss or joy. They feel like their time is slowed down. There's an interconnection with everything.
Yes. Yeah. And so I took that experience, and it made me think, like, when I'm out in nature, usually I'm so oriented toward, like, what am I observing? What am I looking out at? But then I started to turn it around and start to be aware of the space or the trees or the birds and the animals aware of me. And and also, so in that situation, as well as in the ocean, I felt really plugged in, like plugged into everything. And that made me wonder, it seems like nature is naturally that way, like the animals and the trees and everything that has consciousness, because they seem so interconnected and aware. Every animal is very aware of their surroundings and what's going on without necessarily looking at it. They're feeling it and they're receiving it, and seems like, anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that feeling of being both aware of nature and feeling like nature is aware of you is this kind of both and then that seems like, it's like this movement. Are you aware of the space, or is the space aware of itself? And are you aware from the space? Is one of the exercises I do to do that. But then the key is, and do you feel plugged in? So that there's no longer going out to come in, to the going, I'm going, they're aware of them, they're aware of me, plugged in. So plugged in is like the called simultaneous mind. Same taste, seamlessness. And that's a quality that is so refreshing, so relieving. And people experience that in their, favorite times, and they go and do their leisure experience to try to get that. What if you could do that? What if it was an essential quality, not reliant or dependent on a place, a person, a thing, or circumstances? What if it were a way to shift or tune in anywhere, even on the subways of New York City?
And that sounds incredible to be able to do it on the subways in New York City.
Yeah, well, that's where I went. That's where I practiced.
Is that where you're living in New York City, Loch?
I was for 30 years, and now I'm upstate New York.
Okay, where are you in upstate now?
Near Woodstock.
Near Woodstock. Okay.
Called Stone Ridge. Yeah.
That's beautiful up there.
Yeah.
I have so many more questions for you, but we are, limited on our time. So I would like to tell everybody who's listening, if they want to learn more from what you're sharing, I would love for you to share what upcoming offerings that you have and how this work can help people access their self, the self energy, how that impacts their awakening. And I also want to throw in just another curious question for you, Loch, which is, do you see a difference between accessing self with or without psychedelics?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. Good something I'm very interested in, because actually I have been involved kind of early on with even working in the treatment, because I'm a licensed psychotherapist with ketamine. I started when it first came out to treat severe depression. I was helping a couple of my clients who were amazing people with severe depression. And so it was very helpful. And then they would describe these trips. So I was working with that, and then started doing some research with meditation that led to research with psychedelic researchers. And there's this scale called the Pankey-Richards scale, Pankey-Richards mystical scale. And it measures, in psilocybin research, they use it down in Johns Hopkins for treating PTSD and using psilocybin mushrooms. And it's a 1 to 5 scale. And if you score like 3.5 and above in these 40 questions, you'll tend pretty highly to have results from long-term and stable. So I decided to do weekend retreats and give and do this protocol I do with IFS and Effortless Mindfulness, and gave them to my students. And I didn't use the phrases exactly that are in there. And they scored, all 3 retreats scored 4.5.
Amazing.
Yeah. So there's something.
So that's without psychedelics.
That's without psychedelics. Although in my last group in Costa Rica, where it's legal, about 20 out of the 70 people did, on the day off in the middle, did psilocybin mushrooms, and then came back to the group. And then they scored a little lower than the other group. So
were you expecting that, or
no?
Was that surprising?
I expected them to be the same or higher. They were pretty close. It was pretty close, probably within research, but certainly not higher. So that's the amazing thing. So what is the effect of the medicine? The medicine certainly has very strong effects. It takes you into, whether you want to call it ego dissolution, or has the ego managers or parts step back, which is what Dick Schwartz likes to call it. He says it's not dissolving, it's having them all step back. So you have no parts. And then the exiles come forward. And some people with psychedelics can access self, true nature. Others have a bad trip, because if they're flooded with the unconscious and they don't have access to self, and the scary contents come up, 40% of people tend to have a bad experience. Whereas so I'm very interested in both, treating people and seeing how there's an integration with IFS and particularly effortless mindfulness and psychedelics, but also I think I'm more interested now in almost creating a protocol and a kind of retreat for those who don't want to take psychedelics or who have taken psychedelics enough they don't want to take them anymore, or they want to integrate them, or they can't take them. People who are sober, or people who are on antidepressants, or they can still have what can happen in those healing experiences is the same as happens in the effortless mindfulness awakened consciousness. They move through these 5 levels of mind, and then they're able to be from this self-essence and self-energy with parts and memories, and they can kind of self-liberate.
I love that. And I'm with you. I think that it's great to have these options for people because there is a big boom in the psychedelics right now. But I don't know, from my perspective, not a lot of other options, especially involving the psychological IFS work in having these profound transformative experiences without it. So that's awesome that you're providing that. Yeah. So if you'd like to share some of the offerings you have coming up, I know you have a certification program coming up soon.
Yeah. So I have the first part of a kind of in-depth learning of effortless mindfulness, which always has IFS in it, but is primarily for people to use with themselves during the day and work with their parts and access these 5 levels of mind. So coming up October 1st, there is what's called Effortless Mindfulness Level 1, 6-week series. And then in the spring, there'll be Level 2. And then in the fall, there'll be Level 3. And that'll have a certification for helping professionals, people who want to go deeper and just live it, or people who want to even be a facilitator as a meditation teacher. So that's available. And then I have a couple of online.
Wait, I have a question about that one.
Sure.
And congratulations on creating that certification program. That sounds awesome. So it is, if you cannot make it live, you can do it on your own pace.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. So
And if you're doing it on your own, you're not live, is there a way for you to interact and ask questions and things like that?
Yeah, there'll be questions that you'll be able to email in. It won't be as much of the first level won't have as much interaction of questions. So it'll be really an overview and very experiential, though. It'll be like I'll be leading you through, similar to what you're talking about. So there's resources and books and charts and research papers and stuff on the support pages, but I'm going to be like, okay, here we go. You ready? Take a breath. Now, let's see if you can allow awareness to move from thinking to seeing. Okay, now notice that you're not doing it, so I'll like step by step, experientially teaching people how to move their own awareness and access self in a way that they can repeat it on their own. So it's very experiential. And so the videos will be, kind of talking through, then you can email questions. And then by the 3rd level, we'll have small groups that will meet in between, that will be by interest. So therapists will form a little group, coaches, yoga teachers, kind of leaders at work, people who are just creative artists, and then, groups like that.
Okay, great. So, and people need to sign up by October 1st.
Yeah.
Is it closes on October 1st or after?
It does. Yeah. And then, there'll be opportunities after that to take it as an evergreen course, but certainly the being part of the group, if you hear this in time and are interested. Yeah.
Great. And what other offerings do you have coming up?
Yeah. So I have actually a live training at Kripalu Yoga Center in beautiful Lenox, Massachusetts in the middle of October, which is like perfect leaf season,
Yeah, the fall
4-day
foliage.
IFS and Effortless Mindfulness Experiential Retreat. That's coming up mid-October. That's on my website. And then there are 2 advanced courses I did just this year on IFS and this model of moving from self essence to self energy to self leadership that are available on my site for those who want to do kind of a online in-depth training of this approach.
Wonderful. And do you have any other retreats lined up for Costa Rica?
Yes, one more retreat. Costa Rica is the first week in March coming up.
First week in March.
So that's available to sign up for.
Oh,
So
it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I love
there's
Costa Rica.
Still some spaces, and it's just so much fun. It's like everyone has so much fun and does this deep work and then just talks and laughs. So it's not a silent retreat, very deep practicing, and then go to the beach,
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Yeah.
I hope to see you there. And
Okay.
then last question here. What is your greatest wish or hope for humanity?
Yeah. I mean, it really is the relief of suffering at all levels. And yeah, so any level will do, physical, emotional, societal, but certainly to hope that people find this freedom from suffering within, so that wherever they are, whatever situation's happening, they access this awake awareness, this unity consciousness, and unconditional love that is who they are.
Yeah, beautiful, beautifully stated. And I share a similar vision for humanity. And Loch, I want to thank you so much for your time and all the work that you've done to put all this together to help others. It's really, truly special and unique. And I hope that people do come and learn more from you.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. So great to be with you again and see you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please consider assisting me in reaching more people by sharing it with others or writing a review. Together, let's raise our consciousness to help evolve humanity. For more information, please visit my website, daniellekaran.com. That's DANIELLECARRON.com.